Welcome to the Green Wasp Removal YouTube channel. This episode was a challenging one for us to produce because this episode involves killing honeybees. While the majority of bees in this episode were rescued, others had to be killed. Killing honeybees is never a fun process, but it is a necessary process sometimes, and when people need our help, somebody's got to do it. You won't see a lot of YouTube channels willing to post videos about this aspect of the job that we all do sometimes in the removal business, because most channels are too afraid to upset viewers and risk getting a lot of haters and dislikes or viewers unsubscribing and all that. But the fact is, people need to know about this side of the removal business because there are right ways to do this and there are wrong ways to do this. And we hope to educate people about how to do this properly in the rare instances when relocating bees is no longer an option and the bees need to be exterminated for basic public safety reasons. As you'll see in this episode, the right way to kill honeybees is with environmentally responsible techniques and materials that do minimal damage to the ecosystems we work in and kill the least number of bees possible to get the job done right. So this episode is about the right way to do a difficult job. It's simply a necessary public service that needs to be handled professionally and with due diligence. We hope you'll learn something from this episode, and you'll come away with a better understanding of the reality and the necessity of why we have to kill bees occasionally. Bottom line is, it's just the nature of the work sometimes. As always, we appreciate you riding along with us, and we hope you'll stick with us as the 2024 wasp season gets going this spring and summer. We do our best to provide accurate and educational content that's appropriate for all ages, that elevates the YouTube community and educates our viewers from all around the world. Thanks for being here. Enjoy the show. These bees that you're looking at now are part of a colony we've been dealing with since August of 2023, when we initially started doing some rescue removals and some relocation of this hive. We came back in the winter in February of 2024. Once again, we removed and relocated as many of them as we could in February, but there was still some left in the tree that we could not reach with our vacuum hoses. We found them still active inside this tree, and the reason we're coming back in the winter is because we need to get them out and finish off this hive before springtime, when the client who owns this property and owns a tree is going to come out and do her gardening and mow her lawn and begin trying to use her backyard. And as a person with pretty severe venom allergy, her life is at risk if these bees are on her property. That's the bottom line. So we rescued as many as we could, and those that were left, we have to exterminate. If we had the luxury of time, we could probably arrange a trap out. Sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. But we definitely don't have that option when somebody's going to be out in that warm weather with severe venom allergy trying to operate right under that tree. We also can't damage this huge, beautiful tree because the client has asked us not to damage the tree, because to cut a huge hole big enough to remove all this hive and all the comb and all the honey and all the bees would severely damage the tree, and that's not an option either. You can't do a trap out. We've rescued as many as we can possibly reach with our vacuum hoses. We can see the bees in there with our tiny scope cam cable, but we can't get to them to rescue them. There's only one other choice here, and that is to exterminate. Fortunately, we got the vast majority of this hive out and relocated, and sometimes that's just the best you can do. So let's go back to early March 2024, and we'll show you how this job played out. So the first 16 minutes or so of this episode will show you the last relocation collection we did on this nest. After that, after the first 16 minutes, it'll be about the extermination techniques we had to use to deal with the rest of the hive that we could not reach for relocation. All right, we're on scope cam. We're going to head up the tree and take a look. As you can see here, when we rigged up the scope cam, we started with the outside of their entry hole, and there were deceased bees, maybe about a dozen of them, give or take, all over the outside of the entry hole. So we knew that some of the attrition maybe that we'd been doing collection after collection to relocate the bees might finally be catching up with them, and perhaps they weren't surviving the cold weather anymore because their population wasn't warm enough, or their population wasn't large enough to keep the nest warm, or maybe they were starting to starve out, or it could have just been viruses or mites, and they removed bees for that reason as well. It's hard to tell, but this was the first time in several collections that we saw deceased bees outside the nest. Normally, bees will do their own housekeeping, drag their dead outside the nest, but usually they'd be a little further away than they were here. So we investigated further into the nest, and there was definitely a smaller population. We were seeing fewer bees for sure, but ultimately we did find some.
So far, no sign of life. There they are.
So as you see here on the scope cam, there was still a small population of bees inside the nest, so we wanted to do one last collection. So the first operation you'll see here in this episode is an actual collection of live bees into a bee vacuum container. They get knocked out by the cold because it was only in the 40s this day outside the tree, and they can't function in that cold weather, but they warm up again when we take them back to the lab, and then we can find a beekeeper who can take a few bees. So the first part of the video is just that collection. Then we begin the process of attempting to exterminate the remnant bees that were left over inside the tree that we couldn't reach. Due to the limited access holes in this tree, we could only reach so many of them. So here on March 1st, you can see we're doing an inspection inside the tree. Obviously, most of the bees are gone now. We don't see thousands of bees like we've seen in the past when we were doing removals. There's just a few random bees left clustered here and there inside this relatively large hive that we've been sort of by attrition collecting bees out of this hive for a number of months. So we went back on March 9th, and we'll pick it up from there. March 9th, 2024. We're back again today to deal with the bees in this tree. We're going to check on their population that we've been slowly reducing through vacuum extraction over the last few months, starting in August of 23, and more recently this past February of 2024. Here on March 9th, we expect the population to be down pretty good, but we still need to do a little bit more extraction on this, so we're going to go ahead and start that today. Now, one note of caution. It is extremely important that if you deal with bees at all, you have full protection. That's full bee suit or deal with a professional. You just never know when a bee colony, any bee colony, is going to be Africanized or have Africanized genetics, and it could make them extremely aggressive and extremely dangerous. Never, ever work with a bee colony, especially a swarm that just shows up on your property, and assume it's going to be docile, because you just never know if the thing's going to be dangerous. So be cautious. That goes for everybody. We use our suits every time, no matter what, and so should you. All right, let's go take a look. So as you can see on the scope cam, the bees are active and their population still looks pretty healthy. Although it looks smaller maybe than it was, it's hard to tell with the scope cam, because really they could be anywhere else in this tree. We just only see what the scope cam can show us. So what we did here is we left the scope cam cable in here in their main entry hole that they've been using lately, and we stuffed plastic around that so they cannot get out. And in the meantime, what we're going to do is go around the other side of the tree over here where you see this hole and plastic in there. We're going to extract from this side, because that side can actually fit our hose gear, and we're going to film on the scope cam the reaction of the bees when the extraction begins, so we can document their behavior and see how they change their behavior when they perceive a threat inside the nest. Now, we also don't know how many of the other holes on this tree, and there's probably a lot of them, that they have access to get out. But this is what they used to use as their exit. We clogged it up now with plastic. So now we'll see if they can get out during the extraction through another escape route in the tree or not. And we'll go from there. So let's take a look inside the other side of the tree now. So as you can see here on March 9th, This side of the nest was very, very inactive. There was almost no bees on this side of the tree. However, once we got vacuuming, some of the bees that were hiding on the other side of the tree started to rush over here toward the commotion, which is typical. That's how we tend to collect them. We're going to show you on the screen here what the bees were doing inside the tree during this process. The scope cam is rigged to the other side of the tree. Pretty soon they were getting pretty agitated. And this is really what we need them to do in order to vacuum them out of there. They need to be active enough to get near the hose so that we can collect them from these very small access points in the tree. And we only had 2 access points. One was just barely big enough for the fiber optic cable camera to go through. And the other hole on the other side of the tree was maybe 2 inches or less. So we had to use a customized flexible hose to even deal with this side of the tree. But this ended up working. We got another several hundred extracted from the tree before the flow of bees coming out through the vacuum hose slowed down to nothing. And we couldn't get any more out because whatever else was in there was now holed up in an inaccessible part of the tree. But as you can see here, after a little bit of work, we were able to get another several hundred out. You can start seeing them ball up inside the container here. It's a little cloudy, the container, but we're starting to get a decent population out on this final collection for relocation. Here on March 9th, we knew we were getting down to the wire and the last collection was happening, and we really wanted to rescue as many of these bees as we could before we had to start the extermination process for the bees we couldn't reach inside. You can see there was plenty more coming over to this side of the tree, so we knew we'd have our hands full collecting these for a little while, and we just kept at it until the container had filled up with as many as we could get out of there. As they kept coming over to this side of the tree, we were pretty excited there for a while. We thought maybe all of the rest of them that were in the tree were going to come this way. And we were hoping maybe if there was a queen left alive in there, maybe she could come and draw them out. But we never did see a queen that we could identify for certain, so who knows if we got her or not. The bottom line was we were starting to get a pretty decent collection out, and there was fewer and fewer bees to be vacuumed up, and we knew we were coming pretty much to the end of this day. In the meantime, on the other side of the tree, we were monitoring what the other bees were doing on the other side through the scope cam. We could see them, and there was a lot of activity over there still, but we just couldn't reach them. They were pretty much inaccessible.
We've got several hundred of them out already. They get knocked out by the cold as soon as they come into the container because it's about 44 degrees today. Too cold for them to exist out here until we get them back inside to warm them up. Looks like we knocked a lot of the comb out of there. Looks to me like we're seeing some of the wood from the inner tree. Let's get back in there and do some more collection. So as you can see, the Everything Bee Vac by Tony Andrick at allmybees.com, just a great device. We can just hang it on a tree limb and it'll run by itself for hours on battery. No need for electric. You can take it out in the field pretty much anywhere. What we're doing today is we're collecting the specimens in this jar connected to the vac, so they're not going into the vac like they would on a normal bee collection. We want to see how many we're getting every time exactly as they come out, which is why we're doing it this way. You can see we already have hundreds of them in there. We expect today maybe we'll get several hundred to 1,000 out of there. I imagine that's about the last of them that we have there because there's very few coming out anymore. So because of that, they're either in a place where we can't reach them in this huge tree, or we finally got all of them out of there, at least the ones we can get access to. So because of that, what we're going to do now is gas whatever's remaining in the tree that we can't get to. And that's unfortunate. We can't rescue every single one of them, but we've done a lot of extraction here. We were able to rescue as many as we could. And now it's time to just go in there and gas the rest of them so that the ones we can't reach don't become a danger to the homeowner here later in the spring. She's allergic to venom and she needs to mow her lawn right here. And when she does that, she's at risk every time she comes over near this tree. So once the extraction is done here, and we've gotten out as many as we can for rescue, we're just going to hook up a hose to the back of the truck, the tailpipe of the truck. We're going to run that hose into the tree, and that will gas the remaining that we can't reach, the remaining bees that we can't reach, and hopefully kill off that nest once and for all. So to gas whatever's left in that tree, we're going to use a device that is meant to go after moles. What you do is you hook it onto the tailpipe of your vehicle over here, and you run the hose underground to kill whatever moles or voles, whatever you might have, gophers underneath the ground. We're going to use this in a different way today. We are going to hook it up to the vehicle, and we're going to run the other end of the hose right up into the tree, into the main entry of that tree where the bees are. That way we can gas whatever remaining bees we can't reach so that they cannot reestablish a nest there. And once we're convinced that they're completely killed off, the remaining ones that we can't reach to rescue, then we're going to go ahead and seal up the tree. So this is a setup. This piece doesn't usually fit every truck type or every vehicle type of tailpipe, so it'll get gaps in it and whatnot. So you have to kind of stuff plastic or something in there, or tape it. Try to use something that's not going to burn readily if you can, silicone, whatever. But whatever it is, you got to sometimes help make a good seal there. And then you just run the hose directly up into wherever you need it, which is going to be up here today. So we got several hundred of them in here today, and that's about all we can reach for now. So now we're going to just go ahead and gas the rest of them, whatever little few are still in there in inaccessible parts of the tree. All right, so now the next part of this operation is to take the last few that remain in here and gas them with this hose rig so that we can just neutralize whatever remains. We really need that nest to be gone for the safety of this resident. So as you can see, they're very active. They're still hitting the light real hard on the camera. Tough to make out how many are left in there because we just can't see them very well. But there's a few, and we're going to see how they respond while we start applying gas. So we've got the hose rigged. Now we're going to turn on the gas and see how they respond. What we hope to see is less and less activity as more gas enters the tree. So we have the truck running. Let's see what kind of reaction we get. Ideally, what we'll see is the bees slowing down. The few that are left in there, we want them to slow down and start showing signs that they're asphyxiating on CO, which is carbon monoxide. This is a gas that breaks down inside the tree. Once it blends with oxygen, it becomes CO2, which the tree can actually use to breathe and then produce oxygen that we can breathe. So while it's not an ideal solution as far as green applications, it's far superior to spraying poison inside this tree that'll kill all forms of life permanently. The gas will only kill the bees that remain in there, and then it will be gone. It will dissipate and it will break down in the environment into something that the tree can actually use, which is CO2. As you can see, the bees are starting to feel the gas. Their activity is slowing down. They're starting to respond in a way that makes me think the gas is starting to affect them.
So here we're going to focus on the scope cam because you can see it a little better. As you see, the bees are starting to pass out. what happens with carbon monoxide is it drops lower than oxygen in the atmosphere, and it displaces the oxygen to the point where the bees start to pass out from being overwhelmed by the fumes. It's a relatively quick and humane way to kill them if it has to be done. Similar to how we deal with wasps in the field when we're collecting them for venom immunotherapy, we knock them out with dry ice, and the dry ice sublimates into a gas and it knocks them out, and then they freeze. You can see the bees are passing out and just dropping off of the wood inside the tree that they're trying to cling to. So within really less than 5 minutes, we were seeing no more activity in that part of the nest.
So it looks like all the activity inside this nest is gone. As you can see, it's still recording, and there is no activity present. So let's see if we can move the scope around and see anything else.
So as you can see here, there was just nothing moving anymore inside the tree, at least in the parts that we could see. So it looked like the gas had done its job and knocked out the few bees that we could see, or left them immobilized, as you see. So we are unsure at this point, actually, whether or not they would wake back up if they were able to get more oxygen, or how long we'd have to run the gas to make sure they were actually killed off. So we probably ran it 20 or 30 minutes on this day and then called it quits.
All right, it's March 11th, 2024. We're back again today at our favorite bee tree, and we're going to see if they're up there. We're going to use the scope cam again and see how many are surviving, and we'll maybe have to gas them again today if there's any still kicking in there. So let's take a look with the scope cam.
So as we got the scope cam hooked up again, sure enough, we found a few more bees left in there that we couldn't reach with a vacuum hose. So we brought the gas system back up again to see if this would take care of them. The good news was there were fewer and fewer bees.
And you see this cluster of bees, which is on the other side of the tree, the farthest away from the hose. So far, not much effect on them, it appears. It's maybe about 3 minutes so far since the gas has entered the chamber. It's a pretty large cavity inside the tree, so it's a little difficult to tell if this will do much to them. They may have too much fresh air in there from other holes that we can't find yet in the tree. Brings in fresh air while we're trying to seal it up. So far, there are two main entrances that we're aware of, plugged with plastic. One has the scope cam in it, the other has the gas hose in it. Gas meaning gaseous fumes, not liquid gas, of course. But there may be many other holes in this old tree that we just simply don't know where they all are. You know, every limb has holes of one kind or another, but somewhere in the trunk, they may be getting some kind of fresh air that we can't identify yet. But we'll let it run here for a little bit and see what we get. Eight minutes in. So far the hose seems to be delivering gas, but we're not seeing a quick knockdown here like we did the other day. I think because they're a little bit too far away from where the hose comes into the chamber. At least that's my guess anyway.
So on this day, the gas just didn't seem to be knocking them down like it did the first time we rigged up the gas hose. So we decided to move the hose closer to them inside the tree cavity.
So we've got the hose manipulated to the point where it's right next to their chamber, right next to the cluster of bees. So let's see how they handle that. There's one actually climbing around the end of the hose. So it's not clear how much gas is actually coming out of there right now.
It seemed pretty clear that maybe there was some debris stuck in the hose that was blocking the gas, so they just were not affected by the hose at all. So we had to come up with a plan B.
But we've got it pretty well wedged down in there. And if we move it around, we can maybe affect how it gets to the bees. 13 minutes in so far. And we move the hose closer to this cluster to see what happens. So we unhooked the gas hose because it didn't seem to be affecting the bees well enough. I think there's an issue with a clog in the hose. We'll have to replace that and get it going with a better, clearer hose. In the meantime, we're going to try some essential oil. This is a sprayer, and it's filled with soap and water and a high concentration peppermint oil. And we're going to try to use that as an application if we can get it down into the hole far enough. So let's see how that goes. So it looks like our bees are as active as ever. What we're going to do now is we're going to take this suspended container full of soap and water and essential oils, and we're going to spray some of that into this hole if we can reach it. Get that plastic out, and we'll try to get this thing in there. Right now there's not a lot of activity visible there, but there's a little. So let's start spraying in there and see what we can stir up. We'll see what effect that has on our bee friends here. See if we can get it far enough in to see it in there.
So here we're starting to apply the essential oil and soap and water mix. We're just spraying it around inside the hole. The applicator was difficult to get inside the tree, but we were able to get it close enough. You see the bees here getting hit with some of the soap and water, and they're starting to scatter. And the soap and water kills them quickly through suffocation. It's a relatively quick and humane way to do it if you have to do it. The space is so tight to get through that hole that it was difficult really to spray it where we needed it, but it seemed to work. As you can see on the scope cam screen, the oil is just pouring in all over the comb, all over the bees, and it made pretty quick work of the bees. There was very little activity in just a few seconds of time, and they started to try to scatter and escape the spray. So we just kept dousing it and shooting the spray into various different directions around the inner cavity of the tree. It definitely wasn't long before there was very little motion inside the nest that we could see, at least from the scope cam. The difficult part was we couldn't tell if they were fleeing into some part of the tree that we couldn't reach, or if we were just knocking them all out and they were just dying right away and dropping down into the bottom of the tree. It's just difficult to tell when you can't really see what you're doing. There's a little bit of vision from the scope cam, but that was about it. But whatever was going on in there, it certainly was more effective than the gas hose, which we think was just blocked and was not delivering the gas.
Alright, so it's still coming out pretty good. It's all gooped up with honey and comb. Let's see if we can see anything in there. Definitely nothing moving now. Same with this camera angle. So you can see here the spray is definitely hitting its mark, hitting the comb.
So we gave it a few minutes and then we reapplied because we really wanted to hit this nest hard. Anything that was left alive in there, we did not want it to create more pupa, more eggs, more larvae. If there's a queen in there, we want her gone. All of this has to be dealt with as soon as possible before the weather warms up again and people start coming out of their homes for the springtime, and they need the bees gone at that point. So we doused it pretty heavily several times in a row during this application.
All right, let's make sure we still have good pressure. Yep. Okay, so far looks like the damage is done. Let's keep giving it some more. So doing a steady stream in there just to knock out anything that's potentially still moving. As you can see, that stream is hitting the mark. That's probably enough for now. Got a little honey dripping on our screen here, but let's wrap it up there for today, and we'll check it again tomorrow. I have to really give this thing a good clean up. but seems to have done the job real well.
Here's some footage from the scope cam to show you what it looked like from the scope cam point of view when the hose was still in the tree, when we still were attempting to gas them.
All right, so we're at about 30 minutes now. No real significant changes with the bees. So either we're not getting enough gas in there, or they just have too much airflow beyond the 2 holes that we plugged up.
So from this point, the hose was just used as a bit of a battering ram to damage the nest and make it harder for them to rebuild in there and harder for them to feed. And everything we can do to cause distress in that particular cavity helps end this nest.
Try to adjust the hose a little bit here.
So here you can see the hose just kind of knocking around parts of the comb, trying to make things disrupted, trying to make it clear to these bees that this place was not going to be home for long. But they just hung in there. They wanted nothing to do with leaving. We couldn't get them to move into the other side of the tree where we could collect them. They were just kind of stuck in this side of the inaccessible part of the tree. Even the hose, we had a very hard time trying to get the hose to get to where the bees were specifically. We got it pretty close, but we couldn't get it over to that right side cluster. So as you can see, the bees would attack the hose. They were still trying to just basically defend the nest to the end. You got to hand it to them. They were tough little critters. So overall, the hose was kind of failing to do much. Even this little bee here jumps on the hose and just decides to eat some of the honey we had stuck to the hose. They seem pretty nonplussed about the whole deal. So it's kind of like when a gun runs out of bullets, it's only good for just using it as a club. And that's how we ended up with this clogged hose. No gas coming out, so we might as well just use it how we can. So we finally got the bees to scatter just a little bit, but overall this just wasn't working, so we had to move on into the sprayer.
So, score 1 for them.
So here we begin the spray application, and that seemed to do the job. We could just get enough covered that the bees were hit by the oil, the soap and water. We were able to saturate the comb pretty well, and hopefully this will take care of the issue. Bees breathe like wasps through pores in their abdomen that allow them to respirate by expanding and contracting their abdomen. And what happens with soap and water is it clogs those pores and suffocates the bees pretty much instantaneously. Same with oils. It just makes it difficult for them to fly around or escape, and it just clogs everything up and causes them to expire pretty immediately. And we realize it's difficult to see this footage. Nobody wants to see honeybees being killed. The point of this entire video and this episode in general is to show you how to do this in as green a way as possible that makes sense for the environment, for the ecosystem, for the inside of a tree. You don't want to spray poison in there or put in poison powder or any of that stuff. You just want to use techniques that are going to be pretty much temporary. All of this oil, all the soap and water, eventually it simply disintegrates. It's all biodegradable. There shouldn't be any lasting effects. This process shouldn't damage the tree in any kind of permanent way. The cavity space inside the tree should still be able to support life for all the other organisms and insects that are commonly found in trees. It's just that the bees will no longer be here, posing a danger to the property owners who have pretty serious venom allergies, or to the children in the neighborhood who hang out under the tree. There's a bus stop right adjacent to this property. The kids climb the trees. You just have to make it safe, and sometimes this is the only way. So the ultimate goal in any removal situation is to make properties safer for the people who are there. And the secondary goal is to try to save as many bees as you can through relocation, and those that you can't save, you do have to exterminate sometimes. We do the same thing with wasps. We take them off of people's property where they pose a danger to the people, and we try to use them for venom immunotherapy, where we freeze them to preserve the venom so that they don't go to waste. They can be used for the biomedical labs who create venom immunotherapy products that save lives for children, for adults. It's worthy work, and someone's got to do it. So here we are. This is the reality of the business. We hope you can take from this the fact that overall we rescue a lot of bees when we can, and we do the best we can to make sure all life, the entire ecosystem, is protected by not using toxic poisons, which are lethal to all forms of life in the biosphere that we all live in, that we all share. So there is a balance to be had between rescue, extermination, and the way that plays out in the real world is what you see here today. So in all these other YouTube channels where all you see is rescue after rescue of all these bees, just remember, some bees need to be exterminated sometimes. From killer bees, the Africanized populations that are extremely dangerous to all mammals, birds, people, it just becomes necessary sometimes to take care of business and get this work done. Thanks for riding along with us today. We hope you learned something on this episode. Stay tuned. It's going to be a very busy wasp season in 2024, and we look forward to bringing you more content. Have a good one.